of anything they have to offer me, right? It's like, get over yourself, Mark. You gotta.
I believe if we could be indivisible, we would be indestructible. And
Hi, Bear, after this, I don't mean to ask you to put you on the spot to say, tell us what's going to happen in the future, but tell us what's going to happen in the future.
Good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live edition of the Keep Leading podcast. The Keep Leading podcast is dedicated to leadership development and insights. The goal is to help you stay inspired, stay motivated, so you can keep leading. I'm your host, Eddie Turner, the Leadership Accelerator. I work with leaders to accelerate performance and drive impact through the power of professional keynote speeches, masterful facilitation, and executive coaching. Today, we're broadcasting live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. If you would like to hit the share button to allow your colleagues to join our conversation, we welcome you. We want you to be a part of this interview. So you can ask questions, share your reaction if you don't have a question, and you can, even if you can't communicate in the chat, you can send emojis. We love seeing that if you can't do that as well. And if you're not following my guest today, I want you to hit the follow button, connect with her on social media. She's someone you're going to definitely want to stay connected with. And as soon as this session ends, the recording is available to you right in the social broadcast you're seeing it on. And in a week or so, you'll find this available anywhere you download your podcast. As a professional speaker, I am often asked, how do you become a professional speaker? And after giving an answer about what it takes, people say then, well, how do you get to move from being a free speaker to a fee-based speaker? So I typically have been, up to this point, referring people to one specific person I consider an expert in this space. But now I have another expert I'm going to start sending people to. I am so excited about my guest today. When I saw her book, I reached out to her and said, I have to talk to you. I want my audience to get to know you. And her book answers so many of the questions that I'm asked. My guest today is the amazing Christa Haberstock. Christa is the author of the best-selling transformative book, Become a Bookable Speaker. She is, let me just add her to our stage so we can see Christa as I'm talking about her.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Christa. She's a renowned industry expert. Now, this book, the title tells you everything you need to know, in my opinion, which is why I got so excited. But this book has become number one on Amazon, and it stayed there for 4 consecutive weeks. It earned a spot on Forbes' list of the top 5 books you need to read in 2024. Mm-hmm. And that was authored by my good friend, Dr. Ruth Goshen.
Aww.
And she's a prolific author. And anything that she writes, I believe.
She is very, very cool. I met her through LinkedIn, and she speaks on mentorship. She lives it. She's amazing.
Isn't she the best?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the credibility of where that comes from. And so that's why I wanted to highlight that. Christa she's been so successful in her work as the CEO and founder of the C Agency, Bookable Speakers, and C Agency Consulting, that she has generated over $40 million in speaking fees. And her agencies are recognized on numerous prestigious lists and awards. With that, I want to officially say welcome to the Keep Leading podcast. Christa, thank you for being here.
You're so sweet. Thanks for inviting me. This is very cool.
Well, tell me what I missed.
Oh, I think you got it and then some. I would say that if anything, I would dial it back. It's just, I've been in the trenches grinding it out for 27 years in the event industry, working with speakers and finding myself in a lot of ways. You really, if you do anything long enough, I think instead of refining the job you're doing, it refines you in a lot of ways. And that's what this job has done to me and done for me. It's been up and down. The events industry is not for the faint of heart. I'm sure as a keynote speaker that it is, you get out of it what you put into it. And sometimes you got to put into it for a long time to get anything out. So it's, I'm really enjoying it. It's interesting. Recently, people used to ask me what I did, and I'd say, well, generally you just say I work with motivational speakers because that's easier, right? It's like I run a that represents motivational speakers, and I have found myself recently saying it's really fun. Like, looks like the pandemic is behind us. If I can start saying it's fun again.
Excellent. Well, you've already given us the quote of the day. If you do a job well enough, instead of you refining it, it refines you. And
Wow.
certainly you've done that. So thank you, Christa.
Yes.
I also want to say thank you to a couple of folks who have joined us from LinkedIn.
Oh, nice.
We have Dr. Vashonda McLean,
Oh.
who's someone who I know personally. She's one of Houston's finest. She's a police officer, but she also is a professor who is herself just given her first keynote speech recently.
Great.
So welcome, Dr. McLean. We're happy to have you with us.
Cool. Very cool.
And also from LinkedIn, Leanne Schultz. She says, you're amazing.
Yes. Well, I'm only amazing because Leanne's amazing. She and we go way back. That's so cool. She's joining in. Hi, Leanne.
Well, splendid. Thank you for tuning in and for letting us know you're here, Leanne. We appreciate your support and affirmation of Christa. So, Christa, everybody who's joining us wants to know the $1 million question.
Yes.
How do we become a bookable speaker?
We got to buy the book. The end. Just kidding. So becoming a bookable speaker is as anything that's worth having is hard work. And being a speaker is no exception. It is, I've heard it referred to as the easiest profession to get into and the hardest one to actually become successful at. There's no school for it. There's no Ivy League. There's no, masters. No masters of, I was going to say bachelor of something, and I confused it, the two of them. You're welcome for swearing on your show accidentally. Bachelors of anything or masters of anything. It's a lot of school of hard knocks. Maybe a communications degree could help you, maybe not. I would even say that for this side of the industry, the agents, we all kind of fell backwards into it, as far as I can tell. There's one person that I know that's actually using their degree in their profession, which is really kind of interesting. But it's much the same for speakers. So it's your story that qualifies you, but more than that, it's what you learned from your story that qualifies you to speak to other people. So when a speaker gets on stage, I hear this a lot from speakers. I have a great story and I feel like I need to share it. That's true. That's meaningful for that speaker and their story. Is it meaningful for the audience? That's the bigger question. So is the audience learning something from your stories? So what I say oftentimes to your question, to answer your question about becoming a bookable speaker, is why are you on that stage in the first place? Why are you holding that microphone? And to feel like you need to be on a stage, that's one thing entirely, but what you're going to say is completely another thing. And I would hope the reason that a speaker is on the stage is because something has qualified them to be there. Not a degree, not a master's, not a bachelor's, but an experience that can teach or help other people and make their existence better or easier or more meaningful or have purpose and impact. So that's at the fundamental level of what makes a speaker bookable, is the foundation of authenticity.
The foundation of authenticity in a nutshell. Thank you. That is really good to know as we kind of start to dig down a little bit further. I just wanted to kind of get that high level. And of course, yes, we absolutely want people to buy your book. No question about it. So we would be remiss if we would leave that out. So certainly, folks, here is the book, Become a Bookable Speaker, and Christa, that lovely cover. Definitely get a copy of that wherever books are sold. Additionally, we have someone else who just wants to let us know they're here from LinkedIn. Good morning from UAGC, the University of Arizona Global Campus is what that stands for, by way of Southern Mississippi. A pleasure to learn from industry greats. And this is Chivas. Chivas, thank you very much. He's one of the top students there in his program. I sit on the board there. So that is, I just met him. So thank you for tuning in and supporting Christa. We appreciate that.
That's very
All right,
nice.
wonderful. Now, you said something that I thought was really, really interesting along the lines of becoming a bookable speaker and what you said about the foundation. I talked about the amount of revenue you've generated in my intro, but you literally have a skill of identifying folks and then helping them become bookable. So much so, your trademark is you take people from no name to Hall of Fame. Tell us about that.
Happily. Now, remind me to tell you about the second book that I accidentally wrote last week. And I think you'll get a kick out of it. I don't want to start with that, but I do want to talk a little bit about my experience. I have, again, fell backwards completely into this industry. In 1997, I moved from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to Dallas, Texas. I moved in Edmonton. I was an elementary music teacher, trained, got my arts degree in music and got my elementary music degree and in education. And so I was teaching up there in Edmonton. Moved to Dallas, and the circumstances as they were with immigration was that teachers couldn't really get a visa very easily to teach in the States. So I had 4 offers from schools, and the one that I chose started trying to get me a visa, and it just never worked. So as a result, I was kind of stuck in Canada. I had quit my teaching job. We were going to move to Dallas, and we were actually stuck in Edmonton for 6 months with, we had sold our house, we had done everything. Well, in October, which is when Canadian Thanksgiving is, my brother and sister-in-law who live in Dallas, they came up to Edmonton for Thanksgiving. Now, it's important to note that my brother, Vince Pacenti, is a Hall of Fame speaker in 2 countries. He was in the 1992 Winter Olympics as a speed skier, did very well, and his Olympic story has gained him, this Hall of Fame New York Times bestselling status. It's pretty incredible. So he was a fledgling speaker at the time, and his wife, Michelle, they met and married in the events industry. She ran a speakers bureau. So they came up to Edmonton, and I was telling them, what was going on with us. It was hard, I called it life's hallway, where the door behind us was closed and the door in front of us was also closed. And we didn't know what to do from there, give up or what we should do. And so she called me. She got back to Dallas. She said, "Hey, so I just fired somebody, and I think you might be able to do their job and get a visa for it." Fast forward a week later, there I am in Dallas working for Speakers Bureau with 0 sales experience, 0 understanding really what the events industry was. Like, I thought it was wedding planners. What did I know, right? Speakers, I didn't know. So long story short, quick half a day in the file room. She took me for lunch. I explained to her what a Speakers Bureau was. And she said, let's go. So I started planning showcases. And I started working with speakers. Now, when you come into this industry, or any industry, I would say, when you make a hard gear shift from elementary music teacher in another country and go to selling, these thought leaders and sports celebrities and God knows what else, there's a lot to learn. And I think it was a blessing. In fact, I know it was, that I really had no experience, because you pave your own way, which is what I did. I had to use my skills. And what I now know as my obvious advantage, I used the things that came naturally to me, which was a love for connecting and a love for making things make sense to people. So when you have a classroom of 30 students, you have to have the ability to make things make sense to each individual personality style. And that's at the fundamentals of selling. But I also had to figure out how to make these speakers what I now call bookable. So I would take their materials and I'd say, okay, how can I make this make sense to this one event planner? And I would reverse engineer their materials into what the event planner needed and wanted. And I became top producer for 8 of my 10 years. This was an obvious advantage that was not obvious to me until, I'm going to tell you, in the last 4 or 5 years, I realized what I'd been doing. And then I transferred it over to the agency. So I was with the Speakers Bureau for 10 years. And then I went on the representation side. Actually worked for one of the greats, Karen Harris, CMI Speakers in Calgary. I worked for her for a couple years, and found that I was entirely too entrepreneurial for my own good. And I also had a, as you do, I had a different approach. I was just approaching things more creatively. I'm a musician, and I've done stand-up and improv. So
you're a teacher, a musician, stand-up, improv, and I bet you were a great teacher. I did not know that about you, but I can totally see that.
Yes.
Well, listen, you've done that, and you've gone into this area, and you've had this big career shift, this big pivot, and that's a big deal for a lot of people. Now, when you're working in the bureau, the big thing that we learned in this industry coming up as speakers is it's hard to get into a bureau, and the bureaus typically won't represent you until you really don't need to be represented by a bureau. So how do we get on your radar? That's always what people want to know who are becoming professional speakers.
Right. Well, let me address a couple of things in what you just said, and I think it might help with the answer. So as you're coming up, it is hard to get the attention of a speakers bureau or a speaker manager like me, or anyone who might be influential in the speaking industry. So during my time with the Speakers Bureau, which was before I went on the actual representation management side, the speakers that got our attention did it in a few different ways. Now, this is something you don't really have control over as a professional speaker, but it is really attention getting when you lose a booking to another speaker. So it's, you put all these names in a proposal, and then the client comes back and says, well, sorry, we booked Eddie Turner. And you go, who's Eddie Turner? Well, boy, that's a very quick way to get an agent's attention, isn't it? In fact, that's how I found my speaker, Doc Henley, was I lost a booking to him for another speaker of mine. And I called him up right away and I said, we need to know everything about you. And 16 years later, we're still working together.
How about that?
Yeah. So that's one thing you don't necessarily have control of. I definitely think, and again, I will approach this more philosophically and practically, I hope. But philosophically, I want to point back to something that I learned actually from Steve Martin, not directly, I wish, he's one of my heroes. He was in an interview, this was years and years ago. In an interview, he was asked, how do you become a successful entertainer, performer, artist? And he said, be so good they can't ignore you.
Yes.
Critical for speakers to be so good that they can't ignore you. When you lose a booking to another speaker, well, they don't ignore you anymore. If you're so good that a client comes to you and says, listen, have you heard of Eddie Turner? And you're like, no, I haven't heard of him, but I better look him up. So again, there are some ways to engineer that. If you have a client, Eddie, or any professional speaker, if you have a great client that works with a speakers bureau as well, then you would say, would you mind mentioning my name to them? Because you'll have their ear better than I will. And it's really so much like the one thing that I would love for speakers to take away from this practically too, is that not every agency /bureau, that those terms are kind of used interchangeably, are going to be a really good fit for them to.
Is there a difference in those terms? You said they use it interchangeably, but you're right. Agency, bureau. Is one better than the other?
Let me rabbit trail on this because that's a good question. So let me just rabbit trail very quickly. The definition of an agent or an agency is a person that represents. So let me just differentiate. You actually said it when you were setting up the question. You said, how do I get a bureau to represent me? Bureaus, unless you have an exclusive agreement, they don't represent you, they list you. So an agency, which is why I call my company C Agency, because we are the definition of an agency. You know, we represent our speakers. In this side of the industry, you call it a speaker manager or a speaker management company. It's kind of morphed into speaker management agency, which I like because that's what we do. We're managers and agents, 100% of both. But a speakers bureau, now there are, and I don't want to get in the weeds too much, but I think it's important that some of your listeners will appreciate this. So there are bureaus that represent speakers exclusively. That bureau would be their agency, right? But if you are simply listed on a speakers bureau website, they do not represent you. I want to repeat that.
That's a really good distinction to know.
Yes.
I'm glad you answered that. Now, another closely related distinction we need to make is, what's the difference between a professional speaker and a public speaker? A lot of times you look at LinkedIn and folks will say, I'm a speaker, or they'll say, I'm a public speaker. How do you differentiate?
You know, I'm going to probably get myself in trouble because I don't 100% know, but I do know that public speaker is not the right definition for what you do. I think by the very definition of the word professional means that you earn your living from it or you earn money from it. And a public speaker, I don't know. I think it's just somebody who speaks. Not 100% sure. So I really have never differentiated there, but I would encourage the use of professional speaker if this is something that you're endeavoring to do as a career. If it's a hobby for you and if you get money for it, you're probably still a professional speaker. But I would encourage, any speaker who wants to really, really make a good living out of it, it has to be a full-time job. You have to be dedicating the 40, 50, 60 hours a week, or else it's a hobby, in my opinion.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you for that clarity. We appreciate that. And earlier you made a comment about it being the foundation of authenticity.
Yes.
And Dr. McLean says, I love it. So we want to share that. Thank you, Dr. McLean, for tuning in and also sharing your reaction. And then Troy Ottmer, he's also based in Houston, and he says he loves this. So everybody's tuning in for you.
Well, I hope that I can answer any questions they have. So, look, he just asked, is there a blueprint?
Chivas asked the question, is there a blueprint to building credibility to becoming bookable, or does it come with time and experience?
Oh, what a good question. Allow me. This is so great. So is there a blueprint? I hesitate to say blueprint. I'm not going to correct you on just, the semantics of it, but I'll just tell you, for me and for my money, I don't say blueprint. I don't say roadmap. It's not a straight line, and it's not the same for any speaker, as it shouldn't be. So I think that the second you sense that there is a quick start or a potential assembly line that you can hop on, that's when we lose the authenticity. And this is, in my opinion, again, I'm an artist, I'm a creative, I don't see things maybe scientifically as I should, because, professional speaking, the business of professional speaking is an art and a science, 100%. But from the art perspective, I see it very much as a person's who they are coming out into what they say on stage. Now,
who they are coming out into what they say on stage.
Let me just say this about that. I want to be very clear that a lot of speakers, the pendulum is swinging, golly, back and forth. Okay. The pendulum has swung over a little bit to the assembly line. Okay. Like the quick start speaker in a box, because technology is so easy to make things, I've been using AI on my PowerPoint presentation that I'm using on Thursday to speak. I've been using AI. I had AI write me a book last week. It didn't write it for me, but we wrote it together. And so I'm in the final edits on this crazy little book that should have probably taken me at least a couple months to write, but it fast tracked everything. Now, this power could be used for bad, I guess, not for good, but for evil, but to make a speaker look like someone they're not, or they haven't done the reps. So the speakers who are authentic and doing the reps and have a stagecraft and have a great story, and they're out there all the time, but their materials might be unselling them. You have to pay just as much attention to your materials and your brand as you do your stagecraft. And let me flip that. You have to pay just as much attention to your stagecraft as you spend on your brand and materials. They both have to be a level excellence to make it right now in 2025. I promise you that. It is highly competitive and both go hand in hand. So the authenticity on stage, the realness of your story, the reason that you're on stage has to match the quality of your materials and your brand, or you're probably going to be losing bookings to someone who's done it better on either side of that.
Excellent. Thank you for that thorough answer. And thank you, Travis, for tuning in and asking that question. We appreciate it. And Dr. McLean shares with us again her reaction. Ms. Haberstock, I'm so thankful for your gift of shared knowledge. And thank you, Eddie Turner. We appreciate that feedback, Dr. McLean.
Very nice.
Well, listen, I'm going to take a break now a little bit later than I normally do to acknowledge the sponsor of the Keep Leading podcast. If a single employee's indecision can cost an organization $10,000 to $1 million, imagine the potential financial impact when more individuals are added to this indecision equation. It can spiral out of control very quickly. The answer is Decision X. It's a bespoke, on-demand service designed to help your leaders overcome indecision and move forward with their work. Visit Papillon MDC and discover how you can help your team get unstuck, shift perspectives, and advance today. And that, for those who listen to the podcast, you'll find that at PAPILLONMDC.ca, my wonderful friends from Canada. And then also the Keep Leading podcast is a part of C-Suite Radio. Together, we're turning up the volume on business. So visit us at csuiteradio.com. You can get the Keep Leading podcast there or wherever you listen to podcasts. So you made a good point there. And it's going to be one of my final questions to you was about the outlook of the future of speaking. And you've already indicated how you're using AI in your speaking, Christa. Is there anything else that you foresee in your work as an agent, as you can also call yourself the speaker therapist? I wanted to know more about that. But as you look out into the future, is there anything else that's impacting this business that we need to know about?
Yes, for sure. So let me just address the speaker therapist thing really quick. So it is a very short walk as I do my consultation with speakers between what do you speak about, and when they can't articulate it, I say, well, why do you speak about that? And they say, well, I don't know. And then I say, well, who are you as a speaker? Then it's an existential crisis. I'm telling you, it happens in the first thing. So, but I think to draw out the best in any speaker, you have to have a bit of therapist in you.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a wink and a nod to that. As far as what's going on in 2025, I can give you what's happening in the next 6 months, probably. But we have the rapid speed of change it's not unique to us. But what I will tell you is that we are event planners are prioritizing connection, audience interaction, authenticity, which was so nice for me to see on the list. And of course, AI and sustainability. So now I want to just also point this out because I have only recently learned it. So I always want to, as the teacher in me wants to make sure that all the stuff. But when you hear sustainability, I think a lot of speakers would say, well, I'm an environmental speaker. That means my day is here. Not necessarily. The sustainability that they're doing at their events is more of a priority for them than the actual topic. So inspiration, motivation as topics, leadership will always be evergreen. I guess that's a redundancy, is evergreen. And AI is just, it's not going anywhere. And the topic is at the top of the list right now. Sure. So that's as far as topics. But as much as you can, connecting audience members, making sure that the evaluations and the feedback are high in terms of making everything more and more and more about the audience than a speaker ever has. That it's critical that it's a group experience and it's not somebody with a microphone talking at the audience.
Make it about the audience, and no matter how we're incorporating the technologies. Outstanding. Yeah. I could talk to you for hours. I have a ton of questions I still didn't ask you. Listen, Troy says, who has joined us, Troy Ottmer says, great answer and advice. Thank you for that feedback, Troy. And Dr. McLean says, Ms. Haberstock, I would love to connect.
LinkedIn,
So we're going to
baby.
encourage you to do that.
Yes.
And anyone who's tuned in, or if you listen to the podcast later, definitely tune in and connect with Christa Haberstock. She is amazing. Here, can you tell us your website?
Yes, sure. So I've got a few, but I think the one that you're probably going to want to send people to is my first name, last name.com. So christahaberstock.com. And that's where I outline the obvious advantage for anybody and for speakers and for event professionals and for me.
Beautiful. So I'm showing that for the benefit of those who are tuned into this video. If you're tuning in to the podcast, it's her first name, last name, as she said.com. Thank you so much for sharing the wisdom that you've shared with us today. You've given us a lot to think about.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. That concludes this episode of the Keep Leading Podcast, everyone, where we've learned about what it takes to become a bookable speaker. Christa left us with many memorable quotes, and perhaps one of the ones that stands out the most is about being authentic and also making it about the audience. So this is a reminder that leadership is not about our position or our title. Leadership is activity. Leadership is action. It's not the case of once a leader, always a leader. It's not a garment that we put on and take off. We must be a leader at our core and allow it to emanate in all we do. So whatever you're doing, always keep leading.